So joining us now is McKinley, Albany Bureau Chief of the New York Times. Jesse, it's great to have you with us this morning. So now that we have a third allegation coming forward against Governor Cuomo, what position does this put him in?
Well, a fairly precarious one. There's multiple tracks to this. One would be the question of whether or not public pressure and pressure from other lawmakers could conceivably push the governor to resign. I don't think we're quite there yet. But obviously, Democrats have been outspoken about their concern about these allegations. Many are saying the investigation will be kind of the determinant factor if, in fact, Tish James determines that these allegations are credible, that would probably push them into the camp of asking the governor to resign. At the same time, however, he is also facing donors that are getting cold feet about supporting any sort of reelection bid that he's up for in 2022. And also there's the court of public opinion, which seems to have a pretty harsh view of men in power exercising sexual harassment over younger women.
So the question about resignation, Jesse, we mentioned is growing louder. Your reporting would indicate that as well. The question, I guess, is whether or not, at what point would he consider resigning before the investigation results come forward to try to get ahead of it versus after a potential investigation? Can you walk us into that process a little bit and perhaps the mind of the governor as to why he might wait through a full investigation to actually get the results versus try to get ahead of it and resign beforehand?
Well, I certainly think he does not want to resign. That is the nuclear option at this point, and I think that for him, he is trying to basically get through the crisis moment of this and hope that public opinion bounces back for him. The early polling on this has not been good for him, but I think he thinks that perhaps if he can put a little space between these accusations and the report, perhaps he can get his message out that, he says this was just unintended, that perhaps these remarks were misconstrued. In other cases, he's completely denied that anything wrong happened. So from the governor's perspective, I think his strategy at this point is that he's going to try to keep his head down, do his work, and hope that the investigation breaks his way.
Mm-hmm. And the guest that we had on earlier this week was mentioning that the investigation likely to take a few weeks. Jesse, is that the timeline that you see as well before we get some answers?
Well, that may be an optimistic timeline. Typically investigations like this can take more than weeks. They can take months. But obviously, I think considering the seriousness of the allegations, a lot of lawmakers here in Albany have said, look, this needs to be expedited. This needs to be job number one. And we need answers pretty quickly so that we can either move forward in one way or the other.
What would be the nail in the coffin in an investigation and its findings that would lead and cause the governor to resign?
I think that if all of the accusers were considered credible and those accounts were verified, that would certainly be damning evidence that the governor had engaged in sexual harassment against two aides. By the same token, I think that if additional accusers come forward in the days and weeks to come, that could also be very troubling for the governor and very difficult to explain away.
Does your reporting suggest that additional accusers may come forward in the next few weeks?
I think that there are a lot of reporters working on a lot of leads right now, both at my newspaper and at publications across the state and perhaps even across the nation, as well as on broadcast and cable news. So, I think there's a lot of investigative journalistic kind of interest and scrutiny on this topic right now. So we shall see.
Talk about a change, right? In 2020, Cuomo heralded on the national stage for his handling of the coronavirus. And now the most tumultuous time of his 3-year term as governor. Jesse, is this anything that anyone could have seen coming?
It is a very stunning fall from grace. I will say that. I think even pre-investigation, I think that the fact that this time last year, Governor Cuomo was, basically beginning this amazing streak of over 100 straight daily press conferences, where he became, kind of a matinee idol for some people watching those press conferences, resulted in an international Emmy win last year, became, a very popular political figure. The fact that he is now facing calls for his resignation, a subpoenaed investigation by the
Severe.
Attorney General, it is a fall from grace, to be sure.
Jesse, we got to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. That's Jesse McKinley, Albany Bureau Chief for the New York Times.